Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eileen Strumpel, and it is my honor and pleasure to serve as the inaugural dean here at the Herb Alpert School of Music at UCLA. This has been a deeply challenging year for all of us, really with twin pandemics, both with COVID-19 and this racial reckoning of our time. The ongoing trial, the AAPI violence and murders in Atlanta, and the continued murder of unarmed Black men continues to seem almost unending. And yet, amidst all of this incredible pain, this has also been a year of moments of incredible, tender beauty and hope. And one of those moments of hope, many of those moments of hope have been in conversations like tonight. The work that our Anti-Racism Action Committee has been undertaking, and the whole sense of slow emergence into a new understanding with each other. But it underscores the importance of musical communities. And I love Dr. Butler's words, the purpose of community to nurture, to support. And like all loving communities, that means in good times and bad. It means sometimes having crucial conversations, difficult conversations, but with an open heart and an open mind. And so I thank you all for being here this afternoon, for listening, participating, and enjoying and savoring the gift of this conversation as we learn more about how others have created musical community and how we together at the Herb Alpert School of Music can foster our own distinctive musical community. It's my honor and pleasure now to introduce to you our Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, my dear friend and colleague, Arturo O'Farrell. He is the curator of this lecture series, Still Waiting. And thank you so much, Arturo, for hosting tonight.
Thank you, Dean Strempel. It's an honor to be able to do this and to meet brilliant people like Dr. Isrea Butler. I'll give you a quick rundown. He holds degrees in trombone performance from the Eastman School of Music, both master's and undergraduate, and a doctorate from Rutgers University. His teachers include John Marcellus, Ralph Sauer, George Roberts, Tom Irvin, Michael Powell, and Weston Sprott. This is impressive to me. He's played all 4 chairs in the world famous Count Basie Orchestra and with many of the top jazz ensembles. In addition to orchestra and jazz ensembles, he has played in 8 different New York City Broadway productions. He is the music department chair at North Carolina Central University. Dr. Butler was recently the director of bands and music program coordinator at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. He was the director of jazz studies and low brass at the University of Mary from 2013 to 2014. From 2012 to 2013, he was a visiting assistant professor of music at Jackson State University, where he taught trombone and graduate music history and conducted the University Brass Ensemble and the award-winning Jazz Combo. He's also taught at the Eastman School of Music, Juilliard's MAP program in Rutgers University. His students have gone on to perform, teach, and study at graduate school at Indiana University, Berkeley, Rutgers, Eastman, and Montclair. As a conductor, Dr. Butler has been the conductor of the UMES Wind Ensemble and the HBCU Trombone Choir, and associate conductor of the Brighton Symphony and Eastman Trombone Choir and Brass Guild. He studied conducting with Brad Lubman, William Weinert, Mark Scatterday, and Kynan Johns. While in New York City, he was a frequent performer on numerous Broadway shows and many other prestigious musical performances. He has toured, recorded, and performed with many of the country's leading jazz performers and orchestras, including Cab Calloway, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton, the Mingus Big Band, Glenn Miller, the Birdland Big Band, and Jimmy Heath. Also at home playing classical music, he has performed with the Orchestra of St. Luke's, Rochester Philharmonic, and the Buffalo Philharmonic. Dr. Butler is a Conn-Selmer clinician and a performing artist. I'm very honored to call him my friend as well. Please welcome Dr. Isrea Butler.
Thank you, Arturo. I appreciate that. And you left off one very important orchestra. That's the Afro-Cuban Latin Jazz Orchestra, also known as the Arturo O'Farrell Orchestra, which is one of my fondest musical memories. Thank you, Dean Strumpel, for your heartfelt, kind words. Thank you, Arturo, for your introduction. kind of blushing hearing that bio, and coming from being the last chair trombone player in middle school to getting to perform with my heroes is nothing short of a blessing. I'd like to kind of give a little background to how I ended up performing with these different groups, and talk about why I formed my own group, the Gateways Brass Collective. I'm from Sanford, Florida, and I played in middle school. I started out in the choir, but I went to the band director, Mr. Patterson, and I said, there was some kind of mistake here. I wanted to be in the band, and this was, a couple months into school, so I guess all the fun instruments had been given out. So he said, well, you look like a low brass player, and he handed me a baritone horn. So that was kind of hard walking back and forth to school carrying this big, huge coffin case. And eventually, one of the trombone players switched to tuba. So I was able to switch to trombone. And it was kind of funny. I was eventually, in eighth grade band, I was second to last chair, and the guy next to me kept wanting to challenge me. And a substitute middle school English teacher, Mr. Morris, saw me walking back and forth to school with my trombone, and he said, "Hey, I have a tape for you." And I sometimes have to explain this when I'm talking about this to the audience. What a tape is. It's the predecessor to the CD. And he made me a mixtape. So I started listening to that tape and practicing. And in my neighborhood, there was an assistant principal, Dr. Ron Nathan, who had been a music teacher and had played music in the Navy band. He was a music minister. And he would give me some trombone lessons. So I started practicing and playing along to that tape, and kind of got inspired. I got this Wynton Marsalis tape. I guess it was his second recording. And then when I got to high school, I was third out of 10. And on that tape, there was the Count Basie Orchestra, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Glenn Miller, and Artie Shaw. They had their greatest hits. And as I grew up, I ended up playing with all the bands that was on that tape. So that teacher, who wasn't even a music teacher, put that spark. That's why I always tell my students it's important that you encourage your students and be that role model, because you never know where they're going to end up, and not to discourage them. After high school, I joined the Marine Corps, and I played in Marine bands in Camp Pendleton and San Diego. And that's where I started playing Latin jazz, salsa, and different big bands and orchestras. Huge part of my musical training, along with the military, and getting to study with the great studio players and members of the LA Philharmonic out in California. Talking about diversity and being the only one in the room, so to speak, that started for me as early as high school, playing in the Florida Symphony Youth Orchestra in Orlando. So early on, I kind of got used to being the only person that looked like me in the room. I remember seeing the Dallas Brass, and I got to see them because we did a side-by-side concert with the Youth Symphony's brass section. And playing with that group only for a short time was Taga Larson, who is now third trumpet in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And I remember taking my Clark Studies book up, and he autographed it. And it was just great. He was one of the first, Black brass players that I saw playing with a high-level group. And before that, principal clarinetist with the Philadelphia Orchestra, Ricardo Morales, came and played for my middle school. So he was one of the first people of color that I saw that was professional. And I think he was maybe 19 or 20 at the time, and already amazing virtuoso. He went on to the Met after that, before going to Philadelphia. And it's funny, I ended up playing with his brother in The Lion King. So back to my little story. After the Marine Corps, I went to University of Arizona for a year and then transferred to Eastman. And this summer, this past summer, I got to serve on a commission for equality and racial justice at the Eastman School of Music, which was great. Eastman was fantastic for me. My teacher, John Marcellus, was amazing. Watching him work under pressure helped me prepare for what I'm doing now, being a department chair. But then again, Eastman, a lot of times there was only a couple of us in the ensembles. After Eastman, I moved to New York City and started playing on Broadway and different big bands and orchestras. While I was there, I did my doctorate at Rutgers. So back to Eastman, I got to play in the Gateways Music Festival Orchestra as a freshman, and that was a life-changing experience. First time playing and not being pretty much the only one or two people of color in an orchestra. The entire orchestra was people of African descent. And I met one of my mentors who helped me get my first job, which is why I'm saying this community. Gateways was founded by Arminta Adams Hummings Dumasani, and she was a professor of piano at Eastman, but she was also a musical ambassador for the Eastman School of Music, community ambassador. And she single-handedly put together a orchestra festival that happened every other year at the time at the Eastman School of Music. The festival is now 25 years old. So the connections that I made with playing with Gateways molded my career completely. The first one I met my mentor, Robert Blaine, Dr. Robert Blaine. He helped me get my first teaching job at Jackson State. I actually went in as a visiting assistant professor to fill in for him because he was moved up to be the associate dean. I met Antonio Dangerfield playing with the Gateways Music Festival, and when I graduated Eastman, he was my roommate. Helped me get my first gigs in New York City. Taught me the art of suit wearing and how to be a professional musician. All through Gateways. As part of Gateways, I was asked, even as a student, to be on the board, and I got to work with Dean Paul Burgett. We call him Dean. He ended up being vice president of the University of Rochester. Somebody very dear to us that we lost recently. So playing in that group led me to connections that really helped mold me and open up a whole world of musical opportunities that I would not have had, not have been able to make those connections. One of the connections that I made playing there led to me playing in a brass quintet doing recital at Carnegie Hall. So all of these things are this community helps nurture and inspire people. Since we're talking about Gateways, could you play our clip, Jose? while he's setting that up, I did some calculations.
Wow, look at this. 94% of people believe company culture is important.
From what we could find, okay.
People of African descent have been involved in classical music since the beginning.
This is not about diversity. This music belongs to us. This music belongs to everyone.
Open your ears to hear and understand something that you perhaps don't understand, which is that excellence comes in all people.
Going from 2 to see if this works now with the cellos divided.
The mission of Gateways Music Festival is to connect and support professional classical musicians of African descent and enrich and enlighten communities through the power of performance. Gateways is growing exponentially. We have 125 musicians now. When I first started with Gateways, maybe the full orchestra was 65, so it's doubled.
I've been involved with Gateways since it came to Rochester in 1995. There is a passion for this festival. It's palpable. There is an added ingredient that is the product of shared life experiences that the musicians largely don't get anyplace else.
And the un poco più mosso, that's Italian for hurtling through space.
The thing that's most striking about the Gateways Music Festival is when you see a complete stage, a complete symphony orchestra that is entirely African American, because you just never do. And then, of course, to hear it, the level of players is tremendous.
There's so many discussions in the field about how few African Americans there are and the dearth of players and talent that supposedly exists. And when you concentrate that on one stage as large as Eastman Theater, it demonstrates quite the contrary.
When the Gateways Festival Orchestra walks out on stage, a new line of inquiry or a new conversation is opened with the audience before we've even played a note. Because the backdrop of classical music is that this is a white art form.
The Eastman School of Music has been a supporter of Gateways Music Festival since the very beginning, but kind of behind the scenes. We really needed more support because the festival is growing so quickly. And so the University of Rochester and Eastman School of Music have become partners with Gateways so that we can grow this festival because it's important.
Classical music has not traditionally reflected the population of our country as a whole. I want Eastman to be part of anything that celebrates great music and great music making. And the fact to celebrate this particular area of African American ancestry, I think is just fantastic for Eastman.
We might be few in numbers where we are, but when I come to Gateways, I'm one of many.
There's something so incredibly profound and powerful of seeing other people that look like you know, and do what you do at the level that you do it.
You could just feel the love in the room, looking around, people's smiling faces, you know. It's uplifting. I wish I could bottle this up and take it home with me, you know. It's energizing, it's family, it's love, it's heart, it's soul, it's music.
I personally struggle, and always have, with a sense of hopelessness about race in America. When I see that stage, think, you know, just maybe, it feels really good to see people on that stage, and it eases my sense of hopelessness.
Thanks for sharing that. Our next major performance will be at Carnegie Hall in April of 2022. So we're very excited about that with the Gateways Music Festival. I was going to say before, I did some calculations, and out of 89 orchestras here in the United States, there are only 62 musicians of African descent performing in those orchestras. 62 out of 89. And in each orchestra, there's around 100 musicians. So that's the Gateways Music Festival. Major impact. Every year that the festival happens, there's music in churches, there's music in schools, music in homes. It's not just one concert. It's a big impact to the city of Rochester, and we're looking forward to having residencies in other cities coming soon. The next ensemble that I'd like to talk about is I think this is the Sphinx video. The Sphinx has been an orchestra and also chamber orchestra, but importantly a competition for string players that are African American or Latin American. And I have Jose play that clip. That clip talks a little bit about the organization, another fantastic organization that's partnered up with partly with the University of Michigan as they perform in Detroit. So you can play the next clip, Jose. I'm sorry, this is color music. Color music started out in Charleston, but we've been able to perform in Nashville and Pittsburgh. And this is Carnegie Hall at Pittsburgh.
Wonderful in that there was such an investment on the part of every single person, not just the orchestra, not just the performers, not just the maestro, but every single member of the audience was so completely invested in it.
I really was moved to tears. The orchestra has been wonderful to work with, and I'm thrilled that Lee Pringle has invited me to work with this ensemble.
In tonight's performance, we performed to really honor our ancestors and what they were brought here to do unwillingly. We were able to give them the recognition as well as give them the goodbye that they truly deserve.
I felt myself, float out of my body almost, and it was really a wonderful experience.
Every minute of it. I thought it was absolutely sensational. The quality of this orchestra, Maestro Dunner, the players, it's world class. In its history tonight with a world premiere of John Weinglass' amazing piece, which will live for all time.
It was really a revelation on many different levels. It was wonderful to play with so many musicians of color, but also to play such powerful compositions and works of living Black composers. It's difficult to put into words how much it meant to me, but it was really a transcendental experience.
I could hear where he built the slave ship. I could feel where he built the rice field. It was just phenomenal.
I was moved in a way that it was hard not to have tears come down my eyes, to think about what my ancestors endured as those slave ships were pivoting and dipping on the rough seas, shackled and chained, and Mr. Weinglass made everything come alive. It truly was a masterpiece.
Thank you. So another organization, Color Music Festival, created to help bring to the stage new compositions and showcase both chamber music and orchestral performance of African American musicians and composers. So, Jose, go ahead and play the next clip, which should be Sphinx.
The perception that the talent isn't out there within communities of color is so deeply false in classical music.
Wow, drop the mic. There are millions of kids like this in this country who do not have the resources to become everything that they could be. But fortunately, these programs are doing the job that the bigger society fails to do.
Sphinx's mission is transforming lives through the power of diversity in the arts. And we address the issue of lack of diversity and inclusion through a sense of a pipeline. We have Overture program replace violins in the hands of young people for the first time.
I definitely believe that the Sphinx Overture program has made a difference in this community.
The Sphinx competition is our flagship program. It's a wholesome approach to musician development that goes beyond the competitive mechanism. Sphinx Connect is the epicenter for artists and leaders in diversity, devoted to the issues of inclusion, leadership, and career advancement. We have Sphinx Symphony, which is a professional, all African American and Latino orchestra. And then we have the Sphinx Virtuosi, which is an ensemble of soloists that performs across the country, everywhere from Carnegie Hall to Harris Theater in Chicago, and really communities beyond.
I think the Sphinx organization is so incredibly important. It tries to achieve in our society an equilibrium of people who are incredibly talented and motivated to be part of every aspect of our society.
Sphinx has done tremendous work over its first 20 years. And I think that over the next 20 years, Sphinx will truly transform the lives of millions of more people.
Yeah, the Dworkins have done a fantastic job, really built this organization up. They have leadership cohorts. They have seminars on music. So it's really a comprehensive and educational program, as you heard. Unfortunately, I hadn't had a chance to play with them. The one time they called, I was already booked. So I hope they call again. So these organizations, these are the big three over here currently in America. And then there's a chamber orchestra called the Black Pearl Chamber Orchestra out of Philadelphia, led by Maestra Jerry Lynn Johnson. I did some work with them. She had in a high school, a conducting class. And I played as a part of a brass quintet and a smaller orchestra, empowering students, teaching them how to conduct they weren't actually musicians, all of them, but teaching those skills to to help empower them, which is a great idea. Jose, can you play the Black Pearl Chamber Orchestra clip? Jerry Lynn was also one of the guest conductors at our last Gateways.
Philadelphia is, from a classical music standpoint, certainly just has an incredible, rich history. The Academy of Music has such a history. It's something you can feel the minute you step into that building. It's just amazing. And to have the Philadelphia Orchestra now move into their new home at the Kimmel Center in Verizon Hall, the inside is shaped like a cello. It's gorgeous. So you're making music within the shape of a musical instrument. I love that. I am the founding music director of the Black Pearl Chamber Orchestra. It's a group that I started to address a lot of issues in classical music around kind of diversity and access to the art form. You don't see a lot of African Americans or Latin Americans in symphony orchestras, and so I formed this group to be reflective of the greater Philadelphia metropolitan area. We have a very mixed, rich diversity of cultures and people here in Philadelphia, and I thought it was important that a classical music organization really reflects the community.
There is a fantastic musician and conductor. The next clip is going to be of the Chineke Orchestra. Chichi Nwanku is actually a world-class bassist, and she's performed with the Gateways Music Festival. But she founded this orchestra in 2015, and they've really taken off and done a lot of great work. She also started a youth orchestra there, so that she's doing a lot of great, fantastic work. And just play a little bit of the this clip. This is their last concert before the lockdown over in the UK. Thanks, Jose. I'm going to share the last one. Someone asked what piece that was we were playing with the color of music, and that's the John Weinglass Requiem for Rice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own group, the Gateways Brass Collective. This is a picture we took at one of our residencies at Eastman. So this is the official mission, but the way this group came about, at the HBCU Band Directors Consortium, I think it was in 2017, they had the world famous Canadian Brass as the headliner. They closed out the last concert, and they're phenomenal. At the next NESM meeting in Phoenix, I was sitting with Walt Strayton, one of Conn-Selmer's educational executives, and I was saying, Walt, you saw the impact that had on the students. What if there was a group that same caliber, but that looked like them? And Walt said, Isrea, that's a great, it's perfect timing that you're telling me this, because I just got off a phone call, and the Canadians are leaving Conn-Selmer. Now, they've since rejoined Conn-Selmer, which is a great thing, but that left this window for us to put together a brass quintet. So in our actual quintet, I can show you our website here. We'll try to. Most of these musicians were actually part of the Gateways Music Festival. So we decided what if we could have a quintet that could travel around and be spokesperson for Gateways? Because obviously it's harder to travel around with a full 100-piece orchestra. So one of our last projects was a virtual festival this past November that featured guest artists like Nicole Cabell, new Professor Eastman, Anthony McGill, and we were able to close out that concert. I want you to check out the members. One of my classmates from Rutgers, Eric Davis, frequent hornist on Broadway shows, Porgy and Bess when it was on Broadway, and he teaches at Hofstra. Dr. Eric Davis, I should say. Dr. Richard White, world famous tuba player. There's actually a movie and a book about him, Raw Tuba. If you can look it up, Raw Tuba Film. It's a documentary about his life. He's the tubist in the New Mexico Philharmonic and teaches at the University of New Mexico. You already heard about this guy. Herb Smith. I met Herb as a freshman at Eastman. He was in the Rochester Philharmonic already. Played my first Cab Calloway gig with him. Fantastic musician in person. He's now one of the assistant conductors for the Rochester Philharmonic, in addition to playing trumpet with them. And Courtney Jones. Dr. Courtney Jones is the artistic director of jazz at Florida Atlantic University, and also their trumpet professor. He was one of the first people I talked to spearhead this, to put this group together. And I'm going to play going to play a clip coming up on George Walker's 100th birthday. We're going to play one of his pieces. This is from his Music for Brass. We recorded this for our, back in November for the virtual concert. And that, as you know, we're all different places in the country, so we're able to put this together was a very interesting task.
¿Qué está haciendo Luis él?
Tratando de tocar un video, pero no le ponerse en el chat.
Yo lo tocaría, pero necesito acceso a su cuenta.
La gente está escuchando lo que estás hablando.
Were you able to see that, Jose?
No, I'm trying to open up that video, but it says request sent. I need permission for it.
You see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we had a whole recital of videos like that we never actually played together. It was very interesting. People always ask how we rehearse, being so far apart, but we usually try to show up a few days in advance and do a lot of rehearsing. We're trying a new technique of creating play along tracks for ourselves so we can learn and memorize our shows coming up in the future. So I'd like to talk to Arturo. If you can ask some questions.
I am here for you.
I just want
to definitely. What a
I miss
beautiful
him
presentation. I miss
yeah.
you too, Isrea. Yeah, Dr. Butler. I miss you too, brother. It's so beautiful to see you and you know, gateways, all these incredible things you're doing. And I'm going to open it up for questions in a minute. But before I do, I'd love to ask you something. You're an example of someone who not only is able to sit in many different worlds musically, and I just love that so much. And do you see a hierarchical structure for the way people perceive the different worlds of music? And do you find that along what conduits is that? Is there still kind of a jazz, classical, and can you comment to this kind of colonial decurricularization that's taking place, where people are talking about the complete musician and what constitutes a good musician is this and that, and how we equalize that wheel? Because I know you're dealing with that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Some places they're still in silos, and part of that I think is a defense mechanism. But when we say inclusion, we need to include all styles of music. It's not just for including people, but it's including representation of all of our music. And I find it interesting that a lot of places we don't cherish our own music as much as people do, say, in Japan or Europe. The youth over there, they really know this music. I remember touring Japan with the Count Basie Orchestra and teenagers coming up wanting autographs like we were the Beatles. I'm just, playing bass trombone over here. Or they have the album, like actual record, and ask me to sign. I'm like, I'm definitely not on that. or their phones, they came up and they're like, please sign. They have these colorful cases. But over here, you go to a jazz concert, most times it's not younger people. And that's something we definitely need to change. But being a complete musician, I would not have had half of the career, or probably any of it, if I only played one style of music. Being versatile allowed me to get my first gigs after the military, playing on cruise ships, which helped prepare me for Broadway. I definitely wouldn't have, done half of the stuff. It would have been very small. So being versatile for me has been a huge part of my success, whatever that is. And I think that moving forward, music departments need to look at the curriculum and make sure that their students are going to have their bases covered. There's very limited amount of orchestra jobs, auditions every year. And there's a lot of students coming out that are prepared and qualified to play in those orchestras. What are they going to do if they don't win that audition? There's less than a handful of trombone orchestra auditions in the States, every season, audition season. So what are those talented musicians going to do? Are they prepared to teach? Are they prepared to be arts administrators? Are they prepared to play something other than, classical music? So I think that's something really important. It was kind of taboo, at Eastman in the 60s. They had to rehearse in the basement, and then even calling it stage band. I even see that sometimes in the military. They're like, I'm like, why are you calling it stage band? It's jazz band. Jazz is not, it's not a 4-letter word anymore. people called it stage band because they didn't want it associated with black music. So that's
a beautiful answer. To our job is to turn out musicians that have a broad range of skills, and so I would love to ask our viewers to please type your questions into the Q&A file and see what we have. I know we have a lot of students, a lot of brass students that are so admire you so much, and Chloe Swindler, of course. I mean, people that really look up to you for guidance in how to get into orchestral music, how to get into that world of jazz, how to get into that salsa circuit, and not differentiate, to see it all as being part of a good musician. What does a good musician do? What does a good musician know? How do you arm yourself with as wide a set of tools so that you can be a Dr. Isrea Butler and traverse all those universes? You're an inspiring person to these. So I'm going to ask folks to type in questions. It's really an incredible opportunity to get some information that will be helpful, and certainly about the different ensembles that Dr. Butler has provided us access to. One more question that I have, and also Kynan. I've been dying to ask you about Kynan. What is Kynan? Who decides to tell us what Kynan is, and why is that, or is that not an appropriate discussion? Is it a problem? Is Kynan determined by the theorists? Of course, the big brouhaha, with Schenkerian analysis. And so I wish you'd comment to that and what you think.
That's another good question. That came up this summer when we were talking with the commission at Eastman for racial equality and inclusion and justice. We were talking about having string quartets play music of composers of color, and that was kind of unheard of. And talking about having ensemble directors strategically program music of underrepresented composers. It's the ensemble directors, it's the studio teachers that have to push this, encouraging students to perform those works. Fortunately, one of my teachers, Mike Powell, told me about the George Walker. I had turned pages for Robert Blaine when he did the George Walker concerto, but actually that was the topic for my DMA lecture, was the George Walker trombone concerto. And I interviewed him, and I interviewed Dennis Wick, who did the original recording, and I interviewed Porter Poindexter, fabulous trombonist that went to Eastman at the same time as George Walker, and he premiered the piece. But the canon, the reason why we don't have packed audiences for these classical performances is because it's the same 12 works, regurgitated over and over. When people can see themselves in the space, they're going to want to be a part of it. It's been exclusionary for so long that people don't even know where the concert hall is. You could have it, most concert halls are downtown, and that's where people of color live and work, but they're not going to those concerts. So I think by having changing the canon, the performers can change the canon, the directors and teachers can include these performances, and that's what Gateways has done. We had an awesome piece written for us by Carlos Simon, the John Weinglass, they were Color of Music. Jesse Montgomery's written stuff for us. So these composers are out there. We just have to program them, and that's going to change not only the shape and of your audience. You're going to have a different, more diverse audience because of that. and hopefully you're going to have a more diverse ensemble.
Might you share your thoughts around curricular renewal for the 21st century? How have you navigated this challenge in your own institution, and what advice might you offer to us here at UCLA?
Allowing my faculty to be creative. My music history professor, Dr. Candace Bailey, came to me and I didn't even have to ask her. She said, I'm redoing my history curriculum to have more people of color, more women. Why are we talking about the dead white guys exclusively? And she's redesigning the curriculum. And she's an excellent person to do that, having written so much about women performers and composers. I just think it's important to totally flip the script, so to speak, on our curriculum, and focus more on American music as well. We really, the conservatories, we're trying to conserve European music. We don't live in Europe. They're not over there, conserving our music. A conservatory in America should be about conserving American music and growing American music. And I don't think we do enough of that. So I think that's something that we're addressing along with the curriculum, and having students learn early on about composers of color and women composers.
Very important. Could you address what led to the issuing the study at the Eastman report that we've actually looked at the Anti-Racist Action Committee? So I think it's a brilliant and important work, and maybe you can tell us the genesis of that and how it's being implemented and how you gauge effectiveness and assess the way that's a very important report.
Right. Well, George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, and seeing that there weren't very few students of color at Eastman. One of the most gut-wrenching things that I found out during this kind of rethinking of things that happened when I was a student, but learning that there were only going to be 3 undergraduate freshmen in the freshman class at Eastman this past fall, and learning that it varied between 15 to 20 when I was a student there or less, and it's still around the same number, around 20 or so, and it's not acceptable. These conservatories don't know where to find these talented students. They say, they're not auditioning. Well, you have to go find them. A lot of times they don't audition because they don't think that they would get accepted. Money is also an issue. And one of our recommendations was to offer a lot more scholarships for students of color. And a lot of schools had already started doing that, and hiring more Black faculty. One of our recommendations was to immediately hire a full-time Black faculty in the jazz department. How can you have a jazz department with not one instructor of color? And a lot of the other conservatories are speeding up the process and hiring faculty of color, like Manhattan School and San Francisco Conservatory, just to name a couple, to close this gap.
I want you to address that freshman who is of color and who may be Latinx or whatever. I want you to take a minute and address them. What would you say to them out of your experience, and just say to them what needs to be said? Because I know You know, we have students who are listening, who are watching, who are wondering what they're doing here, how they got here, and why there's no one like them. Maybe you could give them words of concentrated love.
Know that you are counted, you are important, you're just as talented. Your work will be what gets you where you want to be. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be struggle, but you can overcome those. You just have to work. You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to be smarter. And that's just, you know, that's where we are right now. Hopefully, your children won't have as much struggle. Hopefully, things will be better by then. But for you right now, where we are, you're going to have to push. Pay attention in your classes, because you never know what you're going to end up doing. I never imagined that I would be a college band director. You know, I thought I was going to be, you know, just a trombone player and not have to do any of that stuff. So I was trying to recall all the things that my conductor said in class, and try to remember what Jim Dozier and Bill Dobbins said in big band when I was up in front of a big band. So pay attention to class. It's, you know, I know it's a thing. You know, we're back there in the back on our phones, and you know, they're talking to the strings, they're not talking to the brass or whatever. But carve out your own niche. You know, being you know, having individual character is important. Make sure you stand out on your voice or your instrument, and make sure you're prepared to do a lot of different things. I think that's, and do them on a high level. I think that's, you know, that's the only way forward right now is really being immersed and ready to do a lot of different things.
That's a call to excellence, Dr. Butler, that cannot be denied. You're calling us all to excellence. And I thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I have a shout out for you from Robert Sanders, who says, hey, Isrea. And I'm going to ask if there are any further questions. Please take a moment and take advantage of this opportunity to interact with Dr. Butler, who's not just a great musician, not just a model and a standard bearer, but he's also a great human being. I can attest to that, having been in the battlefield with you so many times. That your comportment as a human being is something to really aspire to, man. And I've seen you backstage a bunch of times and chatted with you and rehearsed with you, and it's always a privilege to see you in action.
Thank you for those words. I really appreciate it.
We've seen some duty together, you and I. I guess if there are no more questions, and I wish there would be, but I want to take a minute again and thank you, Isrea. Thank you, Dr. Butler. Thank you for shining a light on a path that many of us don't know exists. And my wife has played a lot of Walker, and you know, it's incredible music. It should be a part of the canon.
Absolutely.
And you know, and there's so much more to discover. And thank you for instructing us today and showing us that. There's a question. Thank you so much, Dr. Butler. Shout out for your contribution to the music industry. Carolyn Washington, shout out to you for your contribution to the music industry. You are family. We love you. Wow. See that? See that? Thank you.
That's my aunt.
That's your aunt. And you know, we want to bring you out to UCLA, maybe do a clinic or have some time with our students, and that would
I'd love to.
That'd be a big wish, a heartfelt wish from all of us.
Yeah, Courtney is an alum, so that he would love that. Bring the brass.
I saw that. I happened to see that he's yeah, I saw that.
The first Black DMA recipient and trumpet, I believe,
in UCLA history.
So well, in Jens's studio, he was Jens's first Black DMA student.
It's
and Chloe's the second.
That's right. And Chloe, I had an opportunity to talk to her yesterday, and She plays so beautifully, and brass is such a demanding instrument. You know, my son's a brass player, and
he's a monster brass player.
Well, you know, I got to withstand those all morning long tones every day.
Mm-hmm.
every day. But it's
he made us all practice because he was back there and still in high school.
Yeah, there's a picture of Adam. There's a picture. If you walk through the halls of UCLA, there's a picture of him. He was a finalist in the Monk one year. And so there's a picture of Adam with Arturo Sandoval and of the other finalists. He was a judge. But yeah, I mean, it is a harsh taskmaster, and I'm so grateful to you for showing us that this is the brass is a world that so many of us are welcome to, regardless of who you are, where you come from, and what your standing is. You know, it's a very, very noble tradition. Thank you, Isrea.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dean Strimple.
Yeah. Before we go, don't go anywhere, folks, because we got another beautiful program that we want to tell you about. It's on May 12th, 2021 from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. Noel Skaggs will talk to us about a very important thing called diversifying the stage. So please return often. We plan to keep the Still Waiting series going for as long as is humanly possible. These discussions must be had. We're still waiting. We are going to still fight. We're going to still show up. We're going to still stand up, and we're going to love each other through the finish line. Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Take care.